Hey, what's up, guys? It's WiseGuyVito here, and today I have an tier list video for you guys. This one will be on Orbitals and Helldivers 2 against the Automaton faction to see which ones are really good and which ones are not so much. So, as always, like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below what you guys think about Orbitals, the state of them, and Helldivers 2 against the Automaton faction, and let's get straight into the video. So, before we start, let's kind of go over the tiers real quick. S tier is pretty much like the meta pick at level 10 difficulty against the Automatons. I do think that there are a few up here. A tier is above average. There might be like one glaring issue with it. It might not be like a one fix all. In my opinion, not necessarily like a meta pick, but it's still really good against the Automatons at level 10 difficulty. B tier is average. You know, neither good nor bad, just kind of just meh tier. C tier is below average. Would like to see some sort of buffs to this, maybe one or two buffs in order to make it more viable at level 10. And then, of course, D tier is Dookie tier. This is the bad tier. This stratagem probably needs reworks to it or just needs something to make it even just average. You know, something that, you know, like, in my opinion, this doesn't fulfill really any niche in the game. And if it does, it doesn't really do it that well to the point where it just needs either a rework or several buffs. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into the video. So the first stratagem that we'll kind of go over is the Orbital Railcannon. I do feel like this is okay for the most part, but I would like to see some buffs to it. It does really good against Hulks, does, good against turrets and tanks if you want to wipe off like one off the map for the most part. But with bot drops calling in, at times like 3 or 4 tanks, 3 or 4 Hulks at a time, with a tank in the mix, in my opinion, at this point, the Orbital Railcannon needs to be buffed. Maybe having 3 orbital lasers at a time, so that whenever you throw it once, it splits off into 3 lasers. And those lasers go after the biggest thing, or like the heavy, or the most heavily armored thing that's on the map, and then insta kills them. Right? I think that would be better. Either that, or just give it a way shorter cooldown than what it has currently. And I think that would be like a good buff to it. If it were to keep like the same cooldown and have maybe like 3 lasers split off, I do think that it would be an A tier at that point. If they were to give it like a smaller cooldown or like a way shorter cooldown, it probably would be B, maybe low A at that point. But until they do that, it's going to be a C tier orbital stratagem for me. The orbital smoke. Hate to say this, I'm going to put most smokes in the game. I already think there's already one good smoke, and that's the the gas orbitals or anything that's gas related. I think that is the smoke of Helldivers 2 right now, because it blinds the enemy, it causes them to shoot in random directions, and it applies a dot damage. I know there might be some people out there who use these like religiously to kind of use as an escape option and stuff like that, but in my opinion, that escape option is gas. Like, gas is just so much better than smoke. Now, if they were to maybe do like a incognito type of mission where you have to sneak past the enemies and not cause any type of call-ins or something like that, I think that actually be a cool mission type. But and then maybe you would see more uses out of these, because you then would be like a solid snake type of deal. You kind of just poof these down, run away, more or less like a stealth mission type of deal. Then I think that these would probably get some more value out of it. But in its current state and with the missions that we're playing right now, I just don't see these really being used quite often. And the niche of them, being that you can get away and you can kind of blind your enemies and they kind of lose sight of you and stuff like that. You're going to be re-engaged with them anyways, right? And in my opinion, again, I'd rather just use gas. Gas, in my opinion, is the best one, because not only are you, gaining that type of breathing room away from the enemies, especially on the automaton front, because I do think the automatons are the more oppressive faction in the game. But you're applying damage over time. Like, they're shooting each other sometimes and like damaging themselves. It's just very good for CC. And while we're at it, I might as well just rate the orbital gas strike. The orbital gas strike is just, it is S tier in every single faction. It might be the best orbital in the entire game. It has a low cooldown. Like I said, applies damage over time, can affect every faction in the game, causes enemies to shoot each other, hit each other, like the whole 9 yards. It in my opinion, it is the best, not only offensive orbital stratagem in the game, but also the greatest defensive stratagem in the game. In its current state, it just does everything very, very well, and that's why I'm putting it in the S tier. Orbital precision strike, I think it's kind of fallen off just a little bit. Low cooldown, really good at blowing up structures. It does fine. If you're able to lead a precision strike on a Hulk, it does okay. Factory Striders, you can definitely put a dent in it with this orbital. Does good against tanks, but in my opinion, it's kind of fallen a little bit because with support weapons being where they are currently, and there are definitely some other better orbitals in my opinion to kind of handle more heavily armored targets while also killing a whole lot more other things in the process. But the nice thing about this is that it does have a low cooldown to it, so it's like a high B to maybe even A. I could definitely see someone saying this would be an A tier type of orbital, but I do think it does pretty well, for the most part. But I do think it's kind of fallen a little bit. It's kind of gotten average for me. Ever since I've used it again, I kind of feel like it has fallen a little bit. I don't know why. It just doesn't feel like the same prior to like the 60-day plan patch and stuff like that. It just doesn't feel the same. So maybe they've changed this secretly. I don't know, because Airhead seems to, they'll put out a series of patch notes, and within those patch notes, or within the patch, there will be stuff that has changed, and they just don't mention it. But in my opinion, like these, it's good. I can definitely see this being an A tier one, but I'm going to kind of be conservative here because I would like to see this thing buffed a little bit as far as on the damage front, and just give it like a little bit of something to kind of make it above average. The walk-in barrage, believe it or not, I do think this is S tier. It's just really good against factory fortresses. It's really good against just any type of structure on the automaton front. And it's just good at handling large factory structures. Really good at handling the bot detector towers and stuff like that. Overall, like if you want to just handle something that's like a structure, like a fortress or anything like that, you just want to bring this. The Gatling orbital, I do think is actually pretty good. It's above average in my opinion. It's really good as like a low cooldown just CC, but it can also penetrate heavily armored targets. So that's why I'm putting it in A tier. The only thing I will say is that I kind of wish it was a little bit more concentrated on its fire. If it was a little bit more concentrated on its fire and not kind of like in a circle pattern, then I'd probably put it in S tier because at that point it would be way better, way better, and actually be really good against Factory Striders. But for me, this is kind of like a high A-ish, like mid to high A orbital. The airburst, again, pretty good against Devastators. Pretty good against. It's just really good CC for the most part. I can kill this thing with tanks, not tanks. Hulks. Does pretty good on that front, but for the most part, it feels like an above average. Low cooldown as well. Phenomenal for like low cooldown builds, in my opinion, kind of like a staple for low cooldown builds. So that's why I'm putting it in the A tier. EMS orbital. I actually don't think this is like a bad stratagem. The only thing I will say about the stratagem is that I kind of wish that it's basically just like a big stun grenade with a very low cooldown, which is good. I just think the only thing that it needs to it is that it needs to stun tanks and factory striders. If you're going to bring something that's basically a giant EMS stun grenade, then it should be able to stun the bigger enemies in the game, right? Other than that, though, it does really good CC. Like, I'm actually starting to see kind of like the the kind of use cases for this, where like a bot drop happens, and let's say if you have, like you don't have anyone to shoot down the drop ships, you kind of just throw this out there and you get it back really, really quick. I think it's like a 60-second or 70-second cooldown, so you get like another one back, and the lingering time is actually not that bad either on it. So, I can see where some people might say it's like a C tier one. I can definitely see that, but I've been using it like a little bit here lately, and I actually do think that it's actually fairly good at CCing and everything else. Napalm barrage, I do think this is more like a high A in my opinion. It's just really good for CC, and automatons actually do get burnt in this game. they are susceptible to fire dot damage, so I think it's fantastic for bot drops. But I do think that there's other orbital barrages in the game, like the walk-in barrage, that are simply just better on the automaton front. Which, by the way, 380, I do think this is an S tier one as well. Sorry, the 120. Excuse me. 120, I do think is S tier. I find this is better on bots than on Terminids, in my opinion. I do think that the 380 is better than the 120, but if you wanted to bring a more concentrated, orbital, then you would bring the 120. But the 120 is, it's not bad. If you wanted to run the 120 and a 380 with a walk-in barrage, I've seen people use that before, where they just bring barrages as kind of like, just for CC clearing, killing, big heavily armored targets like factory structures and such, but also killing like fortresses and like automaton structures as well. It does, like, all these do pretty well. And of course, like the 380, I mean, like, what's there to say about the 380? The 380 at one point was like one of the worst orbital stratagems in the game, and now it's probably like the best just all around. Has like a little bit of a wider spread on its barrages, but for the most part it just does like just big explosion damage, and it does really good against structures, really good against bot drops, and and just crowd control CC and stuff like that. It just does very, very well against the automaton front. So this is my tier list on the orbitals. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below about what you think are the best orbitals and which ones are not so great. We would very much like to hear you or hear your opinion on this. So as always, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.